You ever have a moment that sneaks up on you, changes everything, but you don't realize it until way later? Like, one second you're just messing around with your best friend, joking like you always do, and the next, something shifted, big time. That's exactly what happened to me with Mike. We used to joke about being gay all the time. Never seriously, just this running gag between us. But then one day, he stopped laughing. And suddenly, nothing felt the same. Mike and I have been friends since college, which was, almost 10 years ago now? We met in this tiny coffee shop that doubled as a used bookstore. The kind of place where you sit on creaky chairs and the barista calls you by your first name after a couple visits. Mike was the first person who actually got my dry, sarcastic sense of humor. We clicked instantly, and our friendship just grew from there, with all the usual late-night talks, terrible movies, and the endless barrage of inside jokes. One of the most persistent jokes was about us being secretly gay. It started as a dumb way of teasing each other when we do something a little out of character, like when I admitted I cried during a rom-com, or when Mike showed up to trivia night looking suspiciously well-groomed. We'd laugh it off, roll our eyes, and toss out lines like, "Bro, you're totally gay," or "This is gay, but I'm into it. It was harmless, right?" Just a way to poke fun at the awkwardness of young adulthood. Mike has always been this guy who's a bit more guarded than me. Outgoing, sure, but there's this wall he keeps up that you don't really see past until you're close. I thought I knew everything about him. What he liked, what he hated, even the weird obsession he had with vintage vinyl records, but apparently I didn't know what mattered most to him inside. So this one Friday night, we were at our usual spot, a dimly lit bar that smelled like old beer and stale pretzels, and we were messing around like usual. The conversation spiraled into our usual line of jokes, and I tossed out a dumb comment like, "Man, if you're not gay, you're really killing the act." Mike laughed at first, but then, out of nowhere, his smile just dropped. He got quiet, this tight look in his eyes, and I could tell something was off. I nudged him, asked if he was okay. He didn't answer right away. Then he said something I wasn't expecting at all. Why do we always joke about that? Like it's nothing. It was like the words hung between us, heavy and real. I tried to brush it off, but I could see that this time, the joke wasn't funny to him anymore. That night, I realized there was a side of Mike I'd never seen before. And honestly, I didn't know how to handle it. Because everything we'd been joking about for years suddenly felt like it was hiding something serious, something he couldn't, or wouldn't, say out loud. And I wanted to know, but I also didn't want to push. Looking back, I think that moment was when things started to change between us. The easy, carefree jokes faded, replaced by this quiet tension that made me question what I really thought I knew about Mike and about myself. But at the time, all I knew was that the guy who used to laugh with me was suddenly looking at me like I was holding a secret he couldn't face. And honestly, that scared the hell out of me. I remember sitting there, the noise of the bar fading into the background, as I tried to figure out what to say next. Mike's eyes were fixed on his drink, swirling the amber liquid like it was the most interesting thing in the world. I wanted to break the silence, to say something to ease the weight of that moment, but all I could do was fumble. "Hey," I said finally, because that's about as profound as I could get. I guess we never really talked about why we made those jokes all the time. He didn't look up, just nodded. Yeah, I don't know. It's stupid, right? We joke about being something we're not, like it's some kind of punchline. Not stupid, I said. I mean, I get it. Sometimes it's easier to joke about stuff than face the real thing. He gave me a sideways glance, like he was weighing whether to say more. Then he shook his head and smiled. A little, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "You're surprisingly deep for someone who spends half his time making dumb puns," I grinned. Hey, I have my moments. But inside, I was racing. That night, I drove home with a million thoughts swirling around. Mike's reaction was a curveball I hadn't expected, and for the first time, I started wondering if our jokes were covering something more than just a punchline. Maybe there was something he'd never told me, or maybe something I hadn't noticed. Over the next few days, things were weird between us. We still hung out, but the easy banter was quieter, more careful. The jokes about being gay didn't come up at all, like we were both silently agreeing to avoid a subject. But I could tell Mike was distracted. distant even, and it made me want to reach out, to say something that might break through the wall without scaring him off. One evening, a few days later, I texted him. Simple message. Want to grab coffee tomorrow? My treat. I wasn't sure if he'd say yes, but he did. And when we met up, the tension was still there, but a little softer somehow. We found a quiet corner in a coffee shop, the kind with mismatched chairs and indie music playing softly. Mike looked more relaxed than he had in days, and for the first time, I felt like I might get a glimpse of what was going on beneath the surface. So, I said, stirring my latte, "You've been kind of MIA lately. Everything okay?" He sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "Yeah, I guess. Just stuff." "Stuff?" I pressed, leaning in a bit. He hesitated, then laughed nervously. "You know, life stuff. Work stress, family drama, the usual crap." I nodded, but I could tell there was more. "If you want to talk, I'm here. No judgment, no jokes." Mike looked at me for a long moment. "That's the thing. It's not easy to talk about. Not with anyone, really." I felt my heart rate pick up. "You can trust me." He swallowed hard. "Okay. Just don't freak out, all right? Promise." And then he took a breath and said it. "I've been struggling with this for years, trying to figure out who I am. And I guess, yeah, sometimes the joke about us being gay wasn't really a joke for me. It was wishful thinking, maybe? Or a way to feel something I wasn't ready to admit." I was quiet for a moment, absorbing what he'd said. The guy I'd known for a decade was finally opening up about something raw and real. It wasn't the Mike I thought I knew, but it was the Mike I wanted to understand. "Why didn't you tell me before?" I asked gently. "Because I was scared. Scared of changing everything between us. Scared you'd see me differently. Or that I'd lose you." I reached out and put my hand over his. "You won't lose me. I'm here. All in." He looked at our hands, then back at me, and I swear I saw a flicker of relief. "So, what do we do now?" I shrugged, honestly not sure. "We figure it out. Together." That night felt like the start of something new, even if we didn't have all the answers yet. For the first time, the jokes about being gay weren't just jokes. They were the beginning of a conversation we both needed to have, but had been too afraid to start. Looking back, I realized how much courage it took for Mike to drop that mask. And how lucky I am that he trusted me enough to do it. Because sometimes, the hardest thing isn't falling for someone. It's risking the friendship you already have to find out if there could be something more. After that night in the coffee shop, things didn't suddenly become all sunshine and rainbows. If anything, it was like we'd stepped into new territory without a map. Before, our friendship had been this easy, familiar rhythm. Now, every interaction felt charged, like we were both listening for a note of something more in the way the other spoke or laughed. Mike started opening up, bit by bit, but cautiously. One evening, we were sitting on his couch, watching some random documentary about space, because that's apparently our thing now. And he brought up this whole past he'd never really shared with me. "I guess I never told anyone," he said quietly, "how long I've known. Like, not just the feeling, but the words. It's been eating at me since I was a kid." I looked over at him. The glow from the TV flickered across his face, softening his usual guarded expression. "What held you back?" He shrugged, but there was a tightness in his jaw. "Fear, mostly. I was scared of disappointing my family, losing friends, and honestly, scared of what it would mean for me. I thought maybe if I ignored it, it'd go away." I nodded slowly. "That's rough. But bottling it up like that must have been exhausting." "Yeah," Mike admitted. "Every joke we made felt like a secret handshake or a code. Like I was telling you without really telling you. I wanted to say something that could fix it all, but words felt inadequate. So I just squeezed his shoulder. "I'm glad you told me. Really." He smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. "Me too. But now the question is, what next? How do we keep being us when everything feels different?" That hit me hard. We'd spent so long avoiding change, scared of losing what we had, only to realize we couldn't stay stuck either. I took a deep breath and said, "Maybe we don't have to have it all figured out right now. Maybe it's okay to just be and see where this goes." Mike looked at me, hopeful but unsure. "You really think we can do that?" I know we can. We've been through worse, I joked, trying to lighten the mood. Remember that time we got lost hiking and ended up in that sketchy neighborhood because you trusted your amazing sense of direction? He laughed, eased. Yeah, that was a nightmare. We both laughed, and for a moment it felt like the old days again. The comfort of familiarity mixed with that unspoken understanding that things were changing. Over the next few weeks, our dynamic shifted in small but important ways. The jokes didn't disappear completely. Instead, they became less defensive and more playful, like we were reclaiming them on our own terms. We started spending more time together outside our usual haunts, long walks in the park, casual dinners, sometimes just sitting in silence, sharing space without pressure. One night, we were sitting on a bench overlooking the city skyline, the lights twinkling below like stars. Mike turned to me, this vulnerability shining through. You ever think about what it would be like if we'd met under different circumstances? Like, if I'd come out earlier or if we'd dated instead of just being friends? I looked at him, surprised. Honestly? Yeah, I think about it a lot. He smiled, that slow, genuine smile that hit me right in the chest. Me too. There was a pause as the city hummed around us, and then, without warning, Mike reached for my hand. The contact was electric and familiar all at once. My heart thudded in a way I hadn't expected. I don't want to just imagine anymore, he said softly. I want to try, with you. I blinked, a million thoughts racing. You mean us? He nodded. Yeah, us. I felt the world shift beneath my feet, terrifying and exhilarating all at once. We had crossed this invisible line, from friendship to something else entirely. And even though I didn't know how it would end, I knew I wanted to see where it led. Mike, I breathed. I've wanted this for a long time. I just didn't know how to say it. He squeezed my hand, relief flooding his face. Neither did I. That night, under the glow of city lights and the quiet hum of the world around us, everything felt possible. The jokes, the fears, the years of unspoken truths. They all led us here. And suddenly, the idea of us wasn't a punchline anymore. It was real. We didn't have a roadmap, no clear destination. Just two friends stepping into the unknown, hand in hand, ready to figure it out together. And somehow, that was enough. After that night, things felt different in a way that was hard to pin down. It wasn't just that we'd crossed some invisible boundary. It was that suddenly, every glance, every touch carried weight. The kind of weight that made my chest tighten but also made me feel alive. We didn't jump into anything too fast. Mike and I both knew that the foundation of our friendship was still there, and we wanted to be careful. That said, the way he looked at me sometimes, like he was seeing me for the first time, was both thrilling and terrifying. One Saturday afternoon, about a week after our cityscape night, we decided to cook dinner together at my place. I'm not exactly a great cook, more of a microwave and toast kind of guy, but Mike had this way of making the kitchen feel like home. We were clumsily chopping vegetables, bumping into each other, laughing at our lack of coordination. So Mike said, flashing me that mischievous grin I'd missed, "Any plans for the rest of the night?" I looked up from the cutting board, caught off guard by the question. Honestly, I was thinking we could just hang out here, watch a movie or something. He nodded, then paused, like he was trying to find the right words. I know we said we wanted to take things slow, but I don't want to hide how I feel anymore. About us. I swallowed hard. Neither do I. Without thinking, I reached out and brushed a stray strand of hair behind his ear. His eyes met mine, wide and searching, and then he closed the distance, pressing his lips softly to mine. It was gentle, hesitant, but it sent this electric shock straight through me. When we pulled apart, neither of us said anything right away. Instead, we just smiled. The kind of smile that says, yeah, this is real, and I'm here for it. The rest of the evening blurred into a mix of bad movie jokes and good conversation. We talked about everything. Fears, hopes, the future. Somehow, the more we shared, the closer we felt. But of course, Reality doesn't pause for moments like these. The next morning, I woke up with a knot in my stomach, wondering if Mike felt the same way or if it had all been a beautiful, fleeting moment. I decided to text him first. Simple message. Last night was amazing. Just wanted you to know. His response came quickly. Yeah, me too. Let's not rush. But also, no more pretending, okay? I smiled at my phone, feeling like we were on the same page. But as the days went on, I realized that not everything would be as simple. Mike started pulling back a little, more guarded again, and I couldn't figure out why. One night, after a few days of vague texts and canceled plans, I finally asked him what was going on. We were sitting at a quiet bar, nursing beers, when he looked at me with that familiar mix of hesitation and something else. Maybe fear. I'm just scared, he said honestly. Scared of what this means for me, for us. What if it changes everything? What if I lose my family, my friends? What if I lose you? I reached across the table and took his hand. Mike, I'm here, not going anywhere, and we'll face whatever comes, together. He nodded, but I could see the worry didn't leave his eyes. It was a reminder that even when you find the courage to be honest, the world around you doesn't always make it easy. Over the next weeks, I did my best to be patient, to be the steady presence Mike needed. We kept spending time together, laughing, talking, occasionally slipping back into those old jokes, but now they felt more like a shared history than a shield. One afternoon, we found ourselves at a pride parade. Neither of us had gone before, and the atmosphere was electric, full of colors, music, and people celebrating who they were without apology. Watching Mike light up as he saw everything around us, I felt something shift inside me. It was like the barriers he'd held up were finally coming down, piece by piece. At one point, we stood side by side, hands brushing. Mike looked over at me and smiled. A real, genuine smile that felt like a promise. I want to be proud of this, he said softly. Proud of us. I squeezed his hand. Me too. That moment, surrounded by strangers who were fearless in their truth, felt like a new beginning. It wasn't just about coming out to the world. It was about standing beside each other, no matter what. But even with that hope, I knew there would be challenges ahead. There always are. Family dinners, awkward conversations, the weight of expectations. Yet, for the first time, I truly believed we could face them. Not as just friends joking around, but as something more, because sometimes the scariest leaps lead to the most beautiful landings. And with Mike, I was ready to take that leap, even if I didn't know exactly where we'd land. After that pride parade, things started to shift in ways I hadn't fully anticipated. It was like a door had been cracked open, and suddenly, the parts of Mike I'd never seen before were starting to peek through. His laughter was lighter, his smiles more frequent, and the way he held my hand felt less cautious, more certain. But as much as I wanted to believe that everything was on the up and up, there was still that undercurrent of hesitation. Like, Mike carried this invisible weight that he wasn't quite ready to set down. One evening, a few weeks after the parade, we were at my place, sprawled out on the couch, watching some low-budget action flick neither of us really cared about. Mike was unusually quiet, his gaze flickering to the window, then back at me. Hey, I said, nudging him gently. What's up? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I've been thinking about telling my sister. My heart thudded. Mike was close with his sister, but family was a whole different level of scary for him. I knew how complicated his relationship with his parents was, and I wasn't sure how his sister would take it. You think she'll be okay with it? I asked, trying to keep my voice even. Mike shrugged, but there was that familiar tightness in his throat. I don't know. I hope so. She's always been more understanding than the rest of them. But it's not just about her. What if it gets back to my parents? What if they react badly? I reached out, took his hand in mine. You're not alone in this. He looked at me, eyes shining with something I couldn't quite name. I know. And that's what scares me the most. That I'll mess it up. That I'll lose you. I squeezed his hand. You won't. We'll figure it out. Together. The next few days felt like they were stretched thin, tense yet hopeful. Mike was wrestling with the decision, and I could see it wearing on him. Finally, one Sunday afternoon, he invited me over to his place. We sat in his living room, the air thick with anticipation. I told her, Mike said quietly. I blinked. You did? He nodded, a small smile breaking through. She took it well. More than well, actually. She said she loves me no matter what and that I should be proud. I felt this flood of relief wash over me. That's amazing, Mike chuckled. Yeah, but now comes the hard part. The parents. We both fell silent. The mere thought of telling his parents brought back a whole wave of anxiety I could almost feel radiating off him. Do you want me there when you do it? I asked. He hesitated, then nodded slowly. Yeah, I think I do. The days leading up to the conversation were some of the most nerve-wracking I've ever experienced. Mike was a bundle of nerves, and I was trying to be his rock, but honestly, I was scared too. Not just for him, but for us. Finally, the day arrived. We drove to Mike's parents' house, the car filled with this heavy silence that neither of us wanted to break. His mom answered the door with a warm smile, but I could see the flicker of something in her eyes when she glanced at me. Mike introduced me simply, and after a few minutes of small talk, we moved to the living room. Mike took a deep breath, then said it, the words he'd been carrying for so long. Mom, Dad, there's something I need to tell you. I'm gay. The room went quiet. His dad's expression was unreadable, while his mom looked surprised but didn't say much. Then, after what felt like an eternity, his mom spoke softly. Thank you for telling us, Mike. We love you no matter what. His dad was quieter, but he nodded. We need some time to process, but we love you. I saw the tension ease just a little in Mike's shoulders. After so many years of fear, the truth was out there, and it wasn't the end of the world. On the drive home, Mike reached over and took my hand. I couldn't have done it without you. I smiled, squeezing his hand gently. We're in this together. That night, as we sat side by side in my apartment, the weight of the day slowly lifted. There was still a long road ahead, with conversations to be had and feelings to be sorted. But for the first time, there was hope. Mike leaned his head on my shoulder, and I felt this deep sense of rightness. We used to joke about being gay, he murmured. But now, I'm glad we stopped laughing. I kissed the top of his head. Me too. The first few weeks after Mike told his parents felt like walking a tightrope. Their reactions were better than I'd feared. His mom was warm and supportive from the start. His dad more reserved, but trying to process it all in his own way. Still, I could see the effort Mike was putting into navigating that space, and I knew it was exhausting for him. We leaned on each other more than ever. Little things became anchors. A shared breakfast on lazy Sunday mornings, a text during a stressful workday, a quiet walk through the neighborhood just to get some fresh air. It was like we were building a new rhythm, one that acknowledged the past but also made room for something different. One evening, about a month after the big reveal, Mike and I were sitting in a small park near my apartment. The air was crisp, early fall, and the leaves were starting to turn those deep shades of orange and red. We'd grabbed coffee and just wandered until we found a bench with a good view of the city skyline. He was quiet for a while, fiddling with the sleeve of his jacket. Then he looked up at me, eyes shimmering in the fading light. I'm scared, he said. I didn't want to rush him, so I waited. Scared that even if my family's starting to come around, the rest of the world won't be so kind. Scared about what people will think, or if I'll lose friends, or if this changes how you see me. I smiled softly and took his hand. Mike, you're the same person I've known all these years. Nothing's changed about you. If anything, I feel lucky to get to see the real you. He let out a shaky breath, and for a second, I thought he might cry. Instead, he leaned his head against my shoulder. You've always been my safe place, he whispered. The night stretched on like that, just the two of us, letting the quiet fill the spaces between our words. It felt like one of those rare moments where everything aligns, and you know you're exactly where you're supposed to be. But as much as the present was comforting, the future still loomed with uncertainties. A few days later, Mike got a text from one of his closest childhood friends, a guy they'd known since grade school. I'm coming over, Mike said, his voice tight. I could tell he was nervous, but he didn't want to talk about it. When his friend arrived, I stepped back, giving them space. I heard laughter at first, the easy kind from years of history. But then I caught snippets of the conversation that made my stomach twist. Words like shock, didn't expect, and hope you're okay floated through the door. Later, Mike came out looking drained but quieter than usual. Friends don't always get it right away, he said. I nodded, pulling him into a hug. They will. And if not, screw them. Over the next few weeks, Mike and I tackled that awkward terrain, explaining things, answering questions, and sometimes just being patient with people still adjusting. It wasn't easy, but each small victory felt like a step forward. One night, I cooked dinner. Well, I tried. Mike teased me mercilessly about my overcooked pasta, but it was the first time we'd done something like that together. Just us, no pretense. After dinner, we sat close on the couch, and I found myself reaching for his hand again, like some instinct I couldn't fight. Have I told you lately how much you mean to me? I asked. He smiled, cheeks flushed. More than you know. That kind of honesty wasn't something we'd been used to. It felt new and delicate, but real. I realized then that our friendship had been the soil for something deeper to grow, and I was grateful for every awkward moment and every late-night conversation that had brought us here. But even with all that, there were still doubts swirling around. Mike's fears didn't vanish overnight, and neither did mine. We were learning how to be more than friends, how to love without the safety net of just being bros, and that was terrifying. One afternoon, as we were walking through a crowded street fair, Mike stopped and pulled me into a quiet alley. Can I be honest? He asked. Always, I said. I'm scared I'm going to mess this up. That someday you'll realize you deserve someone better. I stopped and looked at him, my heart aching a little at his vulnerability. Mike, I'm not going anywhere. You're not going to mess this up, because this isn't about perfection. It's about being real with each other, with ourselves. He smiled then, that same slow, genuine smile that had stolen my heart months ago. Thank you, he said softly. In that moment, surrounded by the hum of the city and the noise of strangers, I knew we were walking a tough path, but it was ours, and we were doing it together. And honestly, I wouldn't want it any other way. Months passed, and slowly, the fear started to loosen its grip on Mike. The tight knot of anxiety that had settled deep in his chest began to unravel, thanks in no small part to the steady rhythm we found together. We weren't perfect, and the world outside still had its challenges, but inside the bubble we'd created, there was something honest and unshakable growing. One night, we were back at that same park where Mike had first admitted his fears. The leaves had fully turned by then, fiery reds and golds swirling in the gentle breeze. We sat on the bench, wrapped in warm jackets, holding mugs of coffee that steamed in the cool air. Mike turned to me, eyes reflecting the city lights in the distance. You know, he said quietly, I never thought I'd get to this point, to feel proud of who I am, of us. I smiled, squeezing his hand. You've always had it in you. You just needed to see it for yourself. He took a deep breath and leaned his head on my shoulder. Thank you for being patient, for not giving up on me. I shook my head. You don't have to thank me. You're worth every moment. We stayed there a while, wrapped up in the quiet comfort of each other's presence. No grand declarations or sweeping gestures, just two people who had found something rare and real. Later that week, Mike invited me to meet his sister again. This time, it was different. She greeted me with a warm hug and a knowing smile that said she'd got his back no matter what. When Mike's parents came around fully, they even invited me over for a family dinner. It wasn't flawless or drama-free, but it was honest and kind, the kind of acceptance that feels like a home. Looking back, I realized how far we'd come, from joking about something too scary to say aloud, to finally living it without fear. Our friendship had been the foundation, but what we built on top of it was something far more fragile and beautiful. We still laugh about the old jokes sometimes, but now they're not about hiding or deflecting. They're about remembering how far we've come and the courage it took to get here. Mike looks at me sometimes with that same hesitant smile he had the night he stopped laughing. Only now, the laughter is real and full of hope. I don't know exactly what the future holds, and maybe that's the point. What matters is that we're walking it together, hand in hand, no longer afraid to be who we are. And honestly, that feels like everything.